Labor Talks was John DeRozier, recorded at Chippewa Valley Community Television in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Good day and welcome to Labor Talks. Today's guest is Steve Judd. He is the president of AFSCME Local Union 2233. Steve, also known as Mr. Deferment, is the Deferred Prosecution Coordinator of Eau Claire County, and Steve works for the District Attorney's Office. Steve, welcome to Labor Talks. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Okay, and let's see, my first question is, how long have you been the Deferred Prosecution Coordinator?
Since 2001, so about 14 years now.
And I assume you like your job and you're happy with it?
I very much like my job, yes. I've been a criminal justice guy my whole life. That was my major in college, and these are the types of jobs I've been working, probation and those kinds of things, and this is right up that alley.
Can you give us any specific examples as to why you like it?
I deal with a lot of troubled youths and adults and trying to help them get into a better path for their lives, and so I feel it does help the community as a whole. And it's just it's a good feeling both for me and then for them hopefully as well if they get through and they get the benefit of whether it be information or counseling or what have you. As long as they do get that, I feel that they feel, or hope that they feel that they've obtained something as well.
Now, what exactly does a deferred prosecution coordinator do?
So,
how do you earn the taxpayers' dollar?
If someone does get arrested or charged with a crime, obviously multiple things could happen to them. They could be fined, they could be put in jail, they could be put on probation, and one of the other options is to get a deferred prosecution. And what that entails is the person, defendant, generally pleading guilty to a charge of something that they had done, and then that's where the word deferred comes in. The plea that they give would be deferred. They would be placed on supervision with me and have to comply with specific conditions that were based on their violation, whether it be paying back restitution to victims or doing community service, addressing needs that they have, whether that be counseling needs for drug alcohol issues or anger issues or what have you. And then if they do successfully do this, and of course not commit new crimes, is a benefit to them. They get the charge dismissed or reduced, and if they do not, there's a benefit in that they've already pled guilty and the county no longer has to worry about a trial. They would be just known to have failed, their guilty plea would be entered, they would be convicted of that charge and then move on to sentencing.
So, in effect, this allows the person in question to stay at home, keep his or her job, and it saves the taxpayers some dollars because we're not paying for that person's upkeep in jail.
Well, there's definitely a reduction in the jail population because of it. There is an increase in payments to the victims with restitution. The program itself is self-funded, where the defendants have to pay a fee to be given that opportunity, and so I'd say it's generally about 90% self-funded with just those fees alone, which is to say that pays for my salary and benefits to about the 90% mark, which means the taxpayers aren't even paying for the program itself to get this benefit. The defendants themselves are actually paying the majority of that. So it's win-win all the way around.
And because they're paying, they don't want to do the same, make the same offense again.
Hopefully.
Not even a different one.
I mean, not only that they're paying the money for the fee to be in the program, but also learning their lesson and hopefully understanding the benefit that they're getting in not having a criminal conviction. I mean, that is the biggest carrot that we can give them, is say, hey, you've made this mistake, fix your mistakes, and hopefully don't do it again.
hits them right in the wallet.
I hope, well, it does.
And that should teach them a lesson.
I would hope so.
Now, has your office or position been affected by Act 10? And if so, how?
Well, I would say that all positions in the courthouse have been affected by Act 10. And the biggest way is that everything that we've bargained for in our from a union standpoint for the contracts that we've had year in, year out, in good faith with the county, was basically erased and replaced with a handbook that the county was just gave to us. So what was erased specifically? Longevity was erased. Seniority was erased. We were all placed on the right to work status, which now is, even today, is becoming a big issue for the rest of the state, but we were placed on that at that time. Our time off, our vacation and sick time was reduced. Those were even just some of the main things that were done almost immediately when we were given a handbook, as opposed to something that we had, again, bargained for, given up other things for our contracts, and then we're given these losses almost immediately.
Has Act 10 affected active participation in your local?
It's affected our local tremendously, and all locals, because no longer can they have their union dues removed by our employer, and no longer does anyone have to pay union dues in general. It's all by choice now. And so people make that decision as to whether or not they're going to be in the union and pay dues. And so just by the fact that we don't get much in the way of raises anymore and all of that, of course you're going to say, well, I can save $35 or whatever dues are and still get the benefit of whatever the union is going to give me, because the union has to work for everybody. So I'll get that benefit and not have to pay my dues. Well, unfortunately, a lot of people will make that decision. And so our numbers are decreased by a substantial amount, which means that we do not have nearly as much finances to go out and do things that we would normally do, whether that be helping the community or doing, community service type activities, promoting any kind of political member that we might be thinking about that's a local that we might want to try to help out. These are all things that we can't do in nearly the same strength that we would have been able to before.
Now, I understand that there are those people who work at the courthouse who want nothing to do with the union. But I think that what they don't understand is that without the union, they would be getting absolutely no benefits at all.
Well,
they'd be hurting.
The argument can always be made, if you want to go back, if you just simply want to look at history, it's an easy argument. I mean, before unions, it was unsafe to work. There was no 40-hour work week. There was, benefits were just not there. There was no age. You could hire and force labor onto 14-year-old kids. The list goes on and on as to what unions have done in the past. It's hard to tell someone now, after these things have been, legalized hundreds of years in some of them, that and convince them that these things can be lost. And whereas some of them, like child labor laws and things like that, we don't expect to go away simply because the unions have taken a hit. But it doesn't take much. The list I just gave as to what we were hit with again, the right to work, seniority, our overtime, our vacation time, all of that happened almost immediately. Okay, so to say that would have for the people to say, well, this is not really going to affect us, it has affected us.
Yep.
And all that will happen is that's just going to continue as time goes on, and businesses and the people in power realize that there is no longer anything holding them back from getting every dollar they can and all the profit they can at the expense of the worker. That's almost always a decision, unfortunately, that's made for the dollar as opposed for the worker. And that is what unions are. In the end, that's one of their most important parts. There are jobs that they have to do, is make sure the safety and the well-being of working American families is strengthened as best as possible.
Now, obviously, if you're working in an office in the courthouse, one does not have to be concerned about safety.
Well, it all depends on what you're doing.
Well, we're talking about industrial accidents.
I mean, obviously, yeah, it's not an industrial job, although I do work with criminals.
You may be talking to one right now.
Well,
just teasing, folks.
No, but I mean, you have staff that are out shoveling the walks, plowing the sidewalks, and all that kind of stuff. So
Sure.
There are certainly accidents, and there are certainly things that safety is an important thing to be following. But no, you're right. Like the industrial jobs and things like that are definitely a lot more hazardous.
What I'm trying to point out is this. Because of Act 10 and eventually Right to Work, the employees will see a decrease in their retirement benefits, in their health care benefits, and they may very well also experience an increase in their premiums.
Well, that's already all happening. And it's hard for me to tell you how much of that is from Act 10. I mean, health insurance in general is something that has increased always. How much we pay towards our retirement is going up all the time. So that is certainly something that's happening. And so what we're going to get for our retirement, the issue that you have there is that, that I can just state is you get, I think it's an average of the last 3 years that you made once you do retire, something like that, and then you get like 80% of that or whatever that is. Well, if we're getting 0 raises or such minimal raises as to say that we're still making less per paycheck, simply because our raise doesn't cover what we're paying towards our insurance and our retirement. So almost annually our take home is less. Well, so once the retirement does come, when they take that average, that's continuously not increasing. And so yes, it's going to affect the retirement. It's going to affect how much you can spend when you do retire. It's affecting how much we can spend now. It's having a drastic effect on how much we can go out to our communities and spend money, whether that's going out to eat or buying groceries or whatever. Everybody has to be a lot more careful now because we simply don't make what we did 3 years ago.
Once upon a time, I served on the county board.
I know that.
I was also on the Human Resources Committee. And we sat on different sides of the table, but at least we made a point of getting along. Now, we were told, those of us on the county board and the Human Resources Committee, that Act 10 would save the county lots and lots of money. I didn't see it happening then. I don't think I see it happening now.
No, what it did was Walker gave you a toolbox, right? He said,
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna give you the ability to get through your daily business with less money, because you're going to get less money because the state's not going to give you as much money and because you're not going to be allowed to raise taxes at all. But here's this toolbox for you. And then what the toolbox was the destruction of the union, or collective bargaining, I guess, at any rate. So that no longer can employees get representation like they used to. They are going to get less money, and they are going to, in general, like positions are being cut and not refilled. These are the things that the tools are. These are the tools that Walker gave the county board. The ability to, screw over the workers to cover the money they're not getting anymore. So they're not spending as much. The county is not spending as much money, but they're not getting as much either, and they're therefore not giving as much to the public.
State revenues have decreased.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, I noticed, was that as much as we try to keep good employees, they would go elsewhere.
Well, retirement was a huge issue at the time.
But it costs money to train, to break in new people.
Well, again, once Act 10 happened, there was a huge population of people that just retired because of the fear of what would come next, whether or not their retirement was going to be basically lost completely, or also because they didn't want to live in a world where there was no seniority. What's the point of having worked someplace for 30 years if you know that you have no more respect or you're not in any more position of power at all than someone who got hired 2 months ago? Okay, so there was a lot of people that retired.
Sure.
There is a lot of those people that retired those positions were never refilled. And if you want to talk about keeping employees, well, it's hard when there's a state right next to us that doesn't have any issues with their unions. So of course there's that, and then you can get new employees, but to me the seniority issue becomes, even if it's not something to them right away when they're brand new, eventually it will be. Because when you're a new employee, it's great, right, that you can move up and be in any position you'd like because of the lack of seniority. But then once you're there for 5 years, it's not so much fun anymore.
True.
And so then what's to keep you from staying then? So now the county spent how many dollars training you and keeping you there right around when you're at your peak. If you don't feel completely loved in your job, or you feel like there's a worry that you could lose your job or your position in general, why would you stay when you're at your peak in general and you can go somewhere else that you don't have to have that worry?
I agree. Now, what are the top issues for unions today, especially AFSCME? And are they not similar to issues affecting families overall?
Well, the union's biggest issue is being a strong voice for working families, okay, and protecting working families, and that's what we have. That has to be our number one goal in what we do, and that used to be through collective bargaining and contracts and all that, and a lot of these rights that we've lost. But we still represent the employees. We still are there for them, and as a union president, representing them when necessary if there are issues. But also, we have to be strong in the political arena, as strong as we can be. Know who is for the worker and who is not. That's a very important thing for us to know, and at least tell people so that they have that knowledge when they go to the voting booths. And of course, member retention now is a big issue that never used to have to be, but it is. The union has to be working on that. So what's the common thread, I guess, with regards to the Democrats is the working man, the working family, working poor. These are all issues that the Dems are also hopefully very strong issues for them, and it's where really the unions and the Dems should work together.
Point blank, the Democrats need to wake up and realize that unions are their allies, and we all represent working families. We all represent young people, especially when it comes to decent jobs, health care, retirement benefits. We're in this together.
Right. I think that's the most important thing. And I think it swings both ways. I know for a fact that there have been barbs thrown on both sides of that fence, all right? And unions aren't perfect in the way that they've addressed Dems in the past either, I'm sure. Okay? I, on the other hand, think both of these factions need each other.
Get along.
They should be getting along. There's no reason not to. And obviously, the more people that you have in one party, the stronger you are. And it's just something that it's frustrating to me as someone who's relatively new in both things. I'm relatively new in politics. I'm relatively new in the union, and that is to say 10 years, but still. And to see these two things where, 15, 20 years ago, if you would have told me that the Dems and the unions don't really work together that well, I would have been very surprised. But now it's kind of obvious, and it is disappointing.
Now, there are those who say that unions, including AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, have not been able to get their message out to the public. I've seen that message to a limited degree. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it is difficult. I mean, if you just think of the basic message, what is it? It's we want what's fair. We don't want to be rich people. There's nobody in AFSCME that's making, $100,000 a year. We are middle to lower class employees almost across the board. And we want to have a good life. We want to be paid fairly. We want to get benefits that are fair. And that's the message that we try to get across. The problem is that to do that, you take money from the taxpayer, because our jobs are 99% of AFSCME jobs anyway are public employees. And so that's the only thing that Walker has had to do to make it an us versus them, is to simply tell everyone who is not a public employee, well, you know where your money is going. It's to these people, and I'm going to try to reduce that. Well, if that's all you say and that's all you hear, our message can't be heard anymore. They don't care. Until they need it, of course. Once you need a public employee, then of course you need them and they better do their job. But when they're not, when they're in the background, when all they think of is tax time or what have you, it is very difficult to get that message across, to say, look, just like anyone else, these people should be treated fairly, they should be making a decent living, and they deserve that. They deserve that respect. So it is difficult. We try to get that message across, but again, I think it's to a deaf ear in a lot of cases.
Now we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and you may feel very comfortable with short answers, because they do tend to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Okay. Are today's Democrats, and I saw this in the last election, do you think that today's Democrats are scared of speaking out for issues affecting union members?
I think in a lot of ways the Democrats are afraid of speaking out for what should be democratic goals.
I can live with that.
I think that Democrats for too long are trying to become Republican light, so to speak, as opposed to, hey, this is what we believe in and this is what we're fighting for. It's Well, it's just kind of swaying all the time, and we don't really believe, or we're not going to do that to you guys. Don't worry about it. It's just constantly moving right, as opposed to being strong on your principles that have defined Democrats for centuries. And I do believe that is definitely the case.
For whatever it's worth, I saw that happening in the last election. And point blank, I was really disgusted with the Democratic Party. No backbone, none whatsoever.
Well, it was disappointing. I mean, there was a lot of work to put in some referendums based on a minimum wage increase, asking Walker to take the federal money for Medicare, for different issues like that. Liberal issues that are right up in the wheelhouse of the Democratic Party, and these Democratic candidates had them right there on the ballot as talking points, as issues to be, saying to everyone, yes, these are on this ballot, I am for them, and I'm running. And instead, they ran away from every single one of those referendums. You never heard them talk about them. You never heard them talk about the minimum wage. You never heard them talk about taking the federal money. And you know what happened? They all lost their elections, and all of those referendums passed, most of them by big numbers. I mean, that tells you right there, you are not doing, as a politician, you are not looking at what the people want.
That's true.
They want you, and it's most likely what you believe in anyway, but you are afraid to say anything that may ruffle a couple feathers or may get some people farther to the right of you upset.
My thanks to our viewing audience, because after all, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have a program. My thanks to Steve Judd. Thank you, Steve, for appearing on Labor Talks. And remember, Labor Talks can be seen every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. and every Saturday at 12:30 p.m. on channel 993. Thank you very much.
Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cbctv.org.